Hello and welcome back to State of Games, part of GamesIndustry.biz live series of digital shows that we have going on. Our next session is with Alexander Champlin from Niko Partners, who will be telling us all we need to know about the games market in Asia. Unlike the previous sessions, we are doing this one live. So if you've got any questions for Alexander, just drop them into the YouTube chat and we will get to them at the end. So without further ado, over to you, Alex.
Hey, good morning, everyone. And thank you, Chris, for organizing this, and thank you, GamesIndustry.biz, for inviting me and Niko to participate in this talk. All right. So first of all, let me introduce myself. I'm Alex Champlin. I'm a senior analyst with Niko Partners. I joined Niko a little over a year ago after finishing my PhD at the University of California, Santa Barbara. And a little bit about Niko Partners. We're a market research and consulting firm, and we specialize in the Asia games market. You can follow us on Twitter at Niko China. And I also suggest if you like the things that we're covering in this talk today, you can also check out our blog, nikopartners.com/blog, or sign up for the Niko News, which is sort of a weekly newsletter about the games industry in Asia. So first I'm going to hit you with the big numbers. In 2019, Asia games revenue was $69 billion. And this was generated by 1.3 billion gamers in Asia. This is a very significant market. It means that Asia leads the world in esports. It's one of the largest gaming markets by region. And it's leading the world in the development of mobile gaming as well. My talk's kind of broken up into two parts. I'm going to cover quickly the market, just sort of by the numbers, the things you need to understand in order to kind of get a picture of what the games industry in Asia looks like. And then I'm going to pivot to talk about trends. These are the things that we see driving this market forward and sort of shaping the future of gaming in the region, but also kind of predicting the way gaming is going to look globally as the rest of the world kind of follows Asia's lead in a number of these key areas. So first is China's PC games market. In 2019, China generated $14.5 billion in games revenue. And this was generated by 321 million PC gamers. And one way to kind of put this into context for you is this is roughly the population of the United States. So you could imagine every person in the US being a serious PC gamer. And that kind of gives you a sense of how large the market is just for PC gaming in China. And PC gaming has been really important for establishing a foothold for gaming in the region. And what we're seeing is that development's taking place in mobile gaming and in esports, which are the trends I'm going to talk about at the end of this talk today, really kind of depend on that foothold for their growth. It's a well-established market, and so this is why we see these numbers sort of continuing to rise, but rising slowly over the next 5 years. It's just because it's a very well-established market. And what we've also found is that that it continues to grow. It continues to be relevant. During the COVID-19 pandemic, 94% of the people we surveyed said that they were spending more time playing PC gaming, playing PC games, and 76% said they were spending more money on PC games as well. So it's a really relevant pastime for gamers. Before I move on to this mobile slide, I just want you to take note of these numbers and then kind of take note of the numbers for mobile. And I think it'll be pretty telling. So in 2019, mobile games revenue was $18.5 billion. So already significantly larger than PC gaming. But over the next 5 years, we project that this will nearly double to $32 billion in revenue. We also expect that China will add another 100 million mobile gamers over the next 5 years. And so this is going to contribute to mobile being a very significant market for the games industry in China. And China really kind of leads the region in terms of industrial development. So we're going to see similar growth in Southeast Asia and across Asia as well. Like PC, during the COVID pandemic, we've seen 97% of gamers report more time spent gaming. And even more mobile gamers reported spending more on games during this pandemic. Console is a little bit different. Historically, the console industry in China has been small. It's depended largely on imports and gray market consoles. However, we are seeing this change. Most notably, a partnership between Nintendo and Tencent to bring the Nintendo Switch to China creates a significant inroad for console gaming into China. And given the size of PC gaming and mobile markets, what we find is that, if this trend continues, if gray market consoles begin to dwindle and legal consoles continue to rise, this could be a very significant console gaming market. So this is one that we're keeping an eye on at Niko. In Southeast Asia, the PC games market is following China's growth, but it's a few years behind. In 2019, there were 154 million PC gamers, and PC gaming generated $2.2 billion in revenue. A significant part of this market is esports gaming. Esports is a real big driver for PC gaming in Southeast Asia. And we found that 95% of the gamers we surveyed reported playing some sort of esports game. So this could be a MOBA, a multiplayer online battle arena like League of Legends or Dota 2. Shooters are very popular. Battle Royale games, particularly like PUBG and Free Fire and Fortnite have been strong performers. And what we see driving the growth in the growth of gaming across Southeast Asia in the next few years is really going to be increasing GDP in the region, as well as increasing internet user penetration. And this is going to affect both PC gaming and mobile gaming. So in 2019, only 77% of the population in Southeast Asia had access to the internet. However, by 2023, we project this will rise to nearly 100%. And what this is going to mean is just a lot more potential users across both mobile and PC. Like China, the mobile games market is more established and just simply larger in Southeast Asia than the PC games market. And it's also showing more signs of growth. There were 227 million mobile gamers in 2019, and mobile games revenue in 2019 was nearly $3 billion. We project that to grow to just over $5 billion by 2023. Southeast Asia is going to add 150 million more smartphone users over the next few years, and this is going to create a much larger market for mobile gaming. And like PC, and this is a really interesting statistic, like PC, we see a lot of mobile gamers engaging with esports content. Historically, mobile hasn't really been thought of as an esports market, but what we're finding is that in Southeast Asia and Asia more broadly, this isn't necessarily the case. Mobile is a very strong market for esports, and in fact, the growth of the esports industry and the growth of mobile gaming go hand in hand. So we used to say mobile is the future of esports in Southeast Asia, and now we say mobile is the here and now of esports in Southeast Asia. And I'll talk a little bit more about that a little later in this presentation. What I'm going to pivot to now are the trends that we think people should watch if they want to understand what's sort of driving the growth in the region and the avenues for success. And as I've said before, and as I'm going to say a little later on, esports is a real significant driver, and this goes hand in hand with streaming. IP is very important for game companies and game developers to understand. Gamers in the region are drawn to ACG games or popular IP, and so this can be a real significant way to build notoriety or attention for a game, just partnering with an established IP. And the other thing that I'm going to talk about today is the importance of women in gaming, particularly the need for the game industry to cater to women, and the potential that this has for opening up a market segment that's been underserved historically. And if you're interested in other topics from this list, I definitely suggest you check out Niko's blog or Niko's coverage of the games industry. So what I'm going to talk about first are esports in Asia. And there's some pretty significant numbers here. Asia generates nearly half of all global esports revenue. And what this means is just revenue generated by esports productions. So you could think of live streaming revenue or ticketing from esports events or media licenses to broadcast esports content. So what this doesn't include is esports games revenues. This would be revenue that is generated by esports titles, either from game sales or microtransactions. And so what this means is that Asia is really at the forefront of developing an esports industry in terms of developing streaming platforms, infrastructure for esports events, and developing a market for esports partnerships, either from advertisers or media rights holders. And so what we're seeing is that the trends that Asia's developing around esports in terms of subsidies, government support, esports engagement are really kind of predicting the ways that esports are going to grow at a global level. So I'll just run through these numbers kind of quickly, and maybe there'll be some questions about this later on. I'd be happy to tackle. Esports fans include people who watch esports content once a month, and there are 510 million esports fans across Asia. The majority of these are in China, but what we're seeing is that the region as a whole is really interested in esports content. And esports fans are interesting because they're not necessarily esports gamers. There's a lot of overlap here, but there's also a significant population that just engages with esports content. And what this shows is that the esports industry is kind of developing a life of its own. It's still, still directly attached to esports gaming, but there's a growing audience that engages with esports content without necessarily being an esports gamer. Esports players are esports gamers. These are people who play esports games, and there are 595 million esports players or esports gamers across Asia. And so this is a significant audience for esports content, either esports games or esports content. And esports content alone generated $519 million in revenue. This is essentially half of the global esports revenue. So what this shows is that Asia is really kind of leading the charge into esports, and that esports is really shaping the games industry in Asia in terms of what gamers consume and how they engage with this content. And what we found is that the COVID-19 pandemic, particularly quarantine regulations, keeping people indoors, has really kind of created a demand for more esports content. Viewership increased 75 to 100% over the same period in the year prior. during the pandemic, and game spending and time playing increased by a similar margin, 50 to 75%. And in total, esports games generated $24.7 billion in revenue in Asia in 2019. And when we look at mobile, this is even more significant. In 2019, global mobile esports games revenue generated in Asia was $13.3 billion. And this is roughly 68% of the total global mobile esports games revenue. And so what that means is that esports games in Asia do really well. And they're really kind of leading the growth for the rest of the world. And this is in part due to just the size of the mobile gaming audience in Asia. There are 1.2 billion mobile gamers in Asia, and they generate $39.5 billion in mobile games revenue. And so this signals a growing mobile gaming ecosystem, and it's also contributing to a real significant growth in mobile esports, as advertisers and esports producers recognize that mobile is a very large audience and an audience worth courting. Between 2018 and 2019, we saw mobile esports tournaments prizes in Asia increase by 244%. And the reason this is the case is that there's this strong propensity for, or a strong draw for esports themes among gamers in the region. 62% of Chinese gamers are strongly drawn to esports. They're motivated by themes like competition and completion. And so, what we see are core gamers, more hardcore gamers, or super consumers, particularly drawn to esports content. But even casual gamers and other kinds of hardcore gamers are drawn to esports in some way, even if they're not strongly drawn to these kind of core themes. The same is true in Southeast Asia, with 60% of gamers strongly drawn to esports. And so this is a real significant predictor of a game's appeal in this market. If it's reasonable in the sort of design of your game to include competitive or esports elements, this is a great way to engage this market. And there's a lot of things that kind of that circulate around esports that appeal, beyond pure competition. The challenge is also particularly appealing to esports gamers, as well as the community, the sort of the sharing and streaming elements of esports gaming. And so this is the thing I'd like to talk about next, is the significance of the streaming ecosystem. In the West, of course, we're familiar with platforms like Twitch and YouTube, but what we're seeing is that in Asia, there's a real diverse set of live streaming platforms. And what this means is there's a lot of avenues for users to engage with this content, but this diverse ecosystem also means that there's more competition around esports content. And what this is doing is driving up the value of esports media rights, of esports advertising partnerships. And so while we're also seeing some consolidation across the region, this healthy ecosystem of esports and live streaming platforms is giving this content a lot of ways to circulate, and is allowing the market to kind of compete around the value of these media properties. And so, what we find at Niko is that a diverse streaming marketplace is really great for the growth of esports. It's really great for excitement around gaming, and a real great kind of pipeline to get users engaged with your games and your content. Um, Niko tracks streaming content through through our streaming tracker. You can learn more about it at the link on the bottom of this page. But this is just a snippet from our streaming tracker from March 2020. And there's some interesting trends that I'd like to kind of pull out here quickly. You'll notice the first game on the list, the most popular game streamed in China in March 2020, is Honor of Kings, also known as Arena of Valor. And it's a mobile game. It's a mobile MOBA title. So it functions a lot like League of Legends or Dota 2, but it's a mobile title. And what this suggests, I think, it kind of speaks to the point that I was raising about mobile earlier. What it suggests is that mobile is really a significant segment for the growth of esports in the region. And what we're seeing is that there are more mobile players and more engagement around mobile titles, and so we expect this trend to expand to the rest of the world in the next few years. The other thing I'd like to point out here is that the second title on the list is PUBG, a battle royale title, a similar genre to games like Fortnite or Free Fire or Call of Duty Warzone. And this is a very significant genre for the region, as battle royale titles on both PC and mobile are doing quite well. They're really driving up player bases in the region, and they're going to be the genre to watch going forward. And then third on the list, we have the longtime leader in esports and live streaming, League of Legends, which just shows you how enduring that title is and how significant esports as a whole are in the region. The other trend I'd like to talk about is the rise of female gamers in Asia. In 2018, 32% of all gamers were women. And in 2019, that rose to 38%. We saw an 18% year-over-year growth in female gamers in Asia. And what this means is that there's significant growth in women's engagement with gaming. This growth is higher than the growth of male gamers, in part because that market is already saturated. But what this means is that there's a lot of growth potential around women in gaming. We found that 95% of female gamers played on mobile, but they also might play on PC or consoles, right? These aren't mutually exclusive. And in this study, we found that there were 4 key ways to engage with female gamers. I should say this is part of a research project conducted in partnership with Google as part of their Eye on Asia series titled Think with Google. It's a 4-part collaboration. You can find it if you search Think with Google. And this is the first article in that series. This comes from the first article in that series. And so the 4 key ways we found that that game developers could or game publishers could engage with female gamers and tap into this growing market are to plan for a mobile-first experience, because mobile is where female gamers are most engaged. Is to add storylines and character options and gameplay elements that female gamers can identify with. And part of this means building a team of developers kind of from the ground up that is sensitive to female gamers' perspectives and preferences. So sort of designing with women in mind. And then the last point is to find ways to tap into esports communities, as community is a real strong, if you remember a few slides ago, our gamer segmentation, community is a real strong segment or segmentation where women engage with esports. And so tapping into esports communities and communities around games are a great way to engage women in gaming. And again, this is from our partnership with Google, titled Think with Google. And you can find the link at the bottom of this slide. The last thing I'm going to talk about in this presentation has to do with the developing of games approval process in China. And a lot of what Niko studies in this area are the sort of shifting landscape of games regulations and games approvals. And as we've demonstrated in the sort of the first part of this presentation, this is a real significant market. China specifically, and Asia as a whole. And so for game developers and game publishers interested in tapping into this market, a big hurdle that they have to overcome is figuring out how to get a game approved in China. And so, part of what we do is track the regulations, the game approvals process, and the game approvals list for trends in the kinds of games getting approved, just the sort of the framework for the game approval process. And so, so if you'd like to learn more about this, reach out to Niko Partners, or again, check out our blog. And with that, that's my presentation. Again, you can follow us on Twitter at Niko China. We do a weekly newsletter called the Niko News. It's free on our website, and then also check out, we have a ton of articles on our blog. And thank you for the time. Chris, thank you for organizing this, and thank you to GamesIndustry.biz for putting this all together.
Thank you, Alex. We have had some questions if you've got time to.
Oh, fantastic. Yes, please.
One of them is, how does, can you go over how you define esports in mobile?
Yeah, of course. So we look at genres, and the core genres that we're following are MOBA titles, are shooters like, and particularly battle royale shooters like Peacekeeper Elite, PUBG Mobile, these kind of things. We watch racing games. These are particularly popular in China. You can think of like QQ Speed, Crazy Kart Racer. And then we look at some sort of like genre outliers. So digital collectible card games like Hearthstone or Legends of Runeterra. And then like auto battlers. So you could think of like Dota 2 auto chess, or games like that, Teamfight Tactics, these kind of things. And so I think that answers the question. It was just the definition of esports.
Yeah. How do you define it? Yeah. Mikhail has asked a question. This is a tricky one. Has the pandemic and/or the more critical political attitudes towards China from the West in the last 6 months caused you to revise any projections?
Yeah, definitely. So we're keeping a very close eye on the game's approval process. And if anybody's paying attention, it's been a while since a US game has been approved in China. And so, this is a developing situation. But, in terms of the pandemic, yes, absolutely. We've changed our predictions based on the impact of the COVID pandemic. And what we're finding is that, as I outlined earlier, that spending during the pandemic has, or at least reported spending and reported time playing, has increased. And so I think in the long term, this is going to be a boon for the games industry as a whole. Of course, esports have suffered. A lot of events have been forced to go online only. But what we're seeing is that Asia is already beginning to pull out of that. And the esports industry is finding ways to resume in-person competition without as large of an audience, or with new safety measures in place. And we're seeing new investment as well to kind of to bolster and support the industry. But in terms of online viewership, it's been great. It's been great for esports.
Okay, that's good. Hopefully that answers Mikhail's question. We do have one from Martin Lindell. He's interested to hear more about consoles in Southeast Asia in general, not just China. So he says that Taiwan, Hong Kong, Singapore are more mature console markets, but what about Indonesia and Thailand?
Yeah, absolutely. So as you mentioned, right, more mature console markets exist in Asia, but historically markets like Indonesia, Thailand, Vietnam, and China have not been very strong console markets. What we're finding is that growth is still slow. In this respect, we expect China to kind of lead the rest. And so if the Switch performs particularly well in China, we expect it to maybe gain some traction in other markets as well. But as it stands right now, console remains a very small segment of the market in Asia. Outside of places like Malaysia, Singapore, and Japan, obviously. And so, so in a lot of our calculations, we kind of, we focus on PC gaming and mobile gaming as the sort of the market leaders, and then see console gaming as a small but significant segment in key markets.
Brilliant. I'm probably going to have time to try and sneak in one more question for you.
Yes, please.
Is there anything that might stop the esports success in Asia translating to Western markets?
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the things that we're seeing in Asia is that mobile is a very significant market for esports, and on the whole, esports is really kind of mainstreaming across Asia. And what this means is that the lead gaming demographics, right, the sort of PC gamers and mobile gamers are engaging really strongly with esports content. And in the West, this is a little bit more complicated. In the West, we see kind of a console-forward games market, and we see, we still kind of think of PC gaming as relatively niche, and mobile esports have been even slower to develop outside of Asia. And so I think, the way we think about it, this is coming, it's coming to the West. It's just and really one way to kind of break it down is it's kind of a numbers question. Mobile is more ubiquitous. The audiences are larger. It's just much more accessible, right? The sort of the technology that you need to participate in mobile esports is simpler. But you also have a lot of things you can do with mobile esports that you can't do with PC esports. And so we're seeing retail tie-ins, we're seeing food and beverage tie-ins in Asia. And so what this is contributing to is a really complex market around mobile esports. And so the question is when this will develop for the West, not if you follow me.
Excellent, thank you. You've got a lot of thank yous in the chat for your answers. That is all we have time for, I am afraid. Alex will be joining us at the end of the day for our panel. That's if you're in the UK, that's 7:30. If you're on Eastern, that's 2:30, 11:30 Pacific. Before all of that, our next session is on in just over 10 minutes, basically 10 minutes, which is 6:30 UK time, 1:30 Eastern, 10:30 Pacific. It's on the state of the mobile games market, and it features data firm Sensor Tower. So please join us then. Thank you, Alex. And